I gotta hand it to you, Texas. Never thought I would ever say this, but in a weird way, y'all cooked. Y'all honestly cooked. What's up, everyone? My name is Jet. Welcome back to episode of MDK Racing Victory Stop, wrapping up Texas. Wow. For a race that started out what looked like to be very dull, what a chaotic, twisty turn of events, and it ended up with a shocking winner who was able to snap a long winless streak. Not only long winless streak for the driver, but also a long winless streak for the team sponsor, and a feel-good story for the most popular driver in NASCAR. Obviously, I'm talking about Chase Elliott winning at Texas, but how he got there was just wild. I mean, Chase, he got his break turned around when a lucky caution came his way. It started in stage number one. Larson was leading, just like typical, almost like last weekend in Martinsville. Larson started on pole, led the entire way. It wasn't until a caution came out for Jimmy Johnson in turns 3 and 4, and that would be one of many cautions in that area. When that caution came out, that was during the middle of a green flag pit cycle. Chase Elliott elected to stay out. He started outside the top 20, elected to stay out, and was, I believe, either leading or at the very least in the top 5 when that caution came out. That put Chase Elliott in prime position to be in the top 10 for the rest of the race, and his car really shined from that point onwards. Now, after that, Elliott was in the top 10. Didn't at the very least seem to have the best car, but was, again, just around the top 10. And then we would just see a slew of cautions. They would all take place in turns 3 and 4. So Elliott was firmly in the top 10, but it was still Kyle Larson's race. He still won stage 1. Looked like he had the fastest car. So stage 1 was pretty tame, and at first it seemed as though, okay, we're gonna have a pretty boring, typical Texas race in our hands. From stage 2 onwards, that is when that heart rate level went from there to then just spiking up and down like a madman. First of all, different types of strategy was taking place. You had some drivers that were taking four tires, some taking 2, some taking no tires, and all kind of worked out in their own way, if that makes sense. And on top of that, you throw in the amount of cautions in this race adds more to the chaos. There was a total of 16 cautions, which ties for the most amount of cautions ever at Texas. That was set back in 2022, 2 years prior. Majority of them took place in turns 3 or 4. I mentioned Jimmy Johnson. Well, then on lap 101, Christopher Bell lost the car in turns 3 and 4, and trying to avoid the chaos, Alex Bowman spins, and John Nemechek just pile drives right into the left front of Bowman's car. Bowman's day was done. Bell and Nemechek were able to continue after that incident, but both receive a lot of damage and would not be contenders from that point onwards. But in stage 2, we then would see our first new contender. That would be Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin, another driver that started just outside the top 10 in the 11th position, but it was around stage 2 where he started to really become the new challenger to Kyle Larson. He was out leading, whatever. But Hamlin had a great battle with Mark Truex Jr. for the second position, was able to get by him, and then he had one of the fastest cars in this race. But he didn't have the speed of Kyle Larson. Luckily for him, the racing gods had other plans for Kyle Larson. So a caution came out on lap 114 when Carson Hocevar spun right in front of Kyle Busch in turns 1 and 2. And then Larson's right rear tire just went sayonara, just went off, completely just went off the car. I believe there will be a penalty that will be announced in the week, like on Wednesday or something like that. I believe NASCAR has a system in place where if a tire does leave your stall and goes out onto the racetrack, there will be a penalty for that. But the penalty for Larson because of that at that moment in time was that he would be held for 2 laps because of that incident. And that really, in a sense, took him out of contention. So Hamlin becomes the new leader, but he will not be there for long as him, Truex, a couple other drivers, they're setting up for stage 3. So they pit, and you have some of the drivers that stay out for the final few rounds of stage number 2 to get some stage points. Drivers like Ross Chastain, Bubba Wallace, and Michael McDowell. On a restart, McDowell tried to be a hero in turns 3 and 4, trying to go for the lead, but ends up spinning out on the high lane, spins it, backs it into the wall, brings out the caution. We would see a lot of drivers, not only in turns 3 or 4, but a lot of drivers just on the outside lane not being able to hold it, which is kind of unusual because usually when you in stock car racing, it's always when 2 drivers are side by side, it's usually the inside car that's got no air or that loses it. But in this situation, it was the outside car that would always get loose. But yeah, McDowell crashes, spun, brings out a new restart. Chastain would hold on to the lead and would lead for the rest of stage number 2 with Bubba Wallace right behind him in second place. But with all those cautions, because there was like 4 or 5 of them in the process, you also had Josh Berry spin it back into the wall a couple times, I believe, in this race. With the amount of cautions, Larson, who was 2 laps down, by stage 3 was back on the lead lap. Stage 3 began with another caution. This time you had Bubba Wallace and Chase Briscoe begin stage number 3. They enter turn number 1. Wallace slides up a little bit. Harrison Burton then shoots to the inside, makes it a 3 wide pass. Bubba then enters 3 and 4 very hard, comes up the racetrack right in front of Briscoe. The two make contact, both get sideways. Briscoe spins around while Wallace keeps on going to bring out another caution once again. 86 to go. Ryan Blaney, whether he got loose or he made contact with Ryan Preece, but he ends up getting sideways in turns 1 and 2, and he goes into the wall. But right before that, we would have another challenger, and that was Tyler Reddick, who started, I believe, 4th in this race. Hamlin was there, but Reddick at that point in time had the better car. It was just a matter of him getting the clean air. That's what he needed to be able to hold on to have a shot at winning this race. He got by Harrison Burton right before that Blaney crash, and he took off. It was at a 4 or 5 second lead ahead of Denny Hamlin. Then when we got to the final round of green flag pit stops, his team, once again, in typical 2311 fashion, had a horrible pit stop. 7 seconds slower than Denny Hamlin. Reddick would end up coming out behind Hamlin, but didn't really matter. Reddick had such a fast car, he would end up passing Hamlin not too long after. But then with 39 laps to go, this is once again in the middle of a green flag cycle, another caution comes out. John Nemechek just lost the car in turns 3 and 4, backs it into the wall a ton. With this happening in the middle of a green flag cycle, you had some drivers wanting to stay out. A Chase Elliott. Restart with 34 laps to go, entering turns 1 and 2. Elliott, Reddick, and Hamlin enter in turns 1 3 wide, and Elliott scoots away and takes the lead on the bottom of the racetrack, but he would not be out of the woods just yet. Hamlin would take the lead back with 22 laps to go, but it was around that time we would see Brad Keselowski, who took advantage of that caution when John Nemechek spun, got fresher tires, way fresher tires. I'm talking about 10 plus lap fresher tires than Elliott or Hamlin, and he started to become the fastest driver on the racetrack, was already up to 3rd place, and was hunting down Hamlin and Elliott. Until then, another caution came out with 14 to go, with Stenhouse spun in turns 1 and 2. And then we would see just a whole bunch of restart, crash, restart, crash. Restart, Larson in a jam session. He spun in turns 1 and 2. The next restart, you had Denny Hamlin and Chase Elliott enter side by side for that entire lap almost, entering 3 and 4. Coming to the final lap, Hamlin lost it, spins, backs it into the wall. Then we get sent to overtime number 1, another spin, overtime number 2, this time with Chastain and Elliott. Elliott, though, was able to muscle his way, get by Ross Chastain to take the lead. And on the final lap, Chastain had a big checkup right in front of William Byron. Byron hits him, Chastain spins, brings out the caution, race ends under yellow, and Chase Elliott goes on to win at Texas for the first time ever. He's won at Texas in the Cup Series. His 19th career Cup Series win breaks a 42 race winless streak that goes back to Talladega in the fall of 2022. And this is a cool little nugget. His sponsor, Hooters, this is their very first win since Pocono of 1992. We're talking 32 years since the last time Hooters went to victory lane in the NASCAR Cup Series with the late, great Alan Kulwicki. Elliott goes to victory lane in the Lone Star State. I mean, this was a long review, so it's going to be a long video, but just to show you how crazy this race was. I mean, you had, like I said, 16 cautions. I think you had 23 lead changes among 13 different leaders. And when you look at these results, that should tell you how wild this race was. So Elliott wins. Keselowski, a great run for Keselowski, comes home in 2nd, Byron 3rd, Reddick in 4th. And how about Daniel Suarez? Was nowhere near the mix the entire race, comes home in 5th. Look at these drivers. Suarez 5th, Briscoe 6th, Wallace in 7th, who was stuck just outside the top 20 for almost the entire race. 8th, Austin Dillon, again, nowhere to be found at all. Same thing with Kyle Busch. He started dead last, was outside the top 20 for almost the entire race. He comes home in 9th, and rookie Carson Hocevar in 10th. You want to talk about a wild finish. I mean, when you look at those results, you think, how did that happen? Joey Logano, Ryan Preece, 11th and 12th. Gibbs, Truex, and Buescher, 13th to 15th. Gibbs and Truex, they had rough days. Gibbs had tire problems. So did Truex, who had, a loose wheel, had to come back onto pit road. That sent him to the back. Ty Dillon in 16th. Bell, even with a mangled up car, somehow salvaged a top 20 finish. And then Gregson, Jones, and Hemrick the top 20. Larson, after starting this race on point, ends up 21st. LaJoy, Stenhouse, Haley, and Cindric the top 25. Some other notables, Shane Smith, who was running the top 10 for a good amount during the middle portion of the race. Also, Harrison Burns shows some good moments late in the race. Jimmy Johnson at 29th. Denny Hamlin finishes 30th after his spin. Todd Gillen, Ross Chastain, Ryan Blaney, John Hunter Nemechek, Michael McDowell, Josh Berry, Alex Bowman, and Austin Hill rounds out the 38 car field. Here's a look at the point standings following Texas. First to third remains the same with Larson, Truex, and Hamlin. Chase Elliott now jumps up to 4th place, and now most importantly colored in green. He will make the playoffs for the first time since 2022. Ty Gibbs 6th, Ryan Blaney 7th. How about 8th and 9th place? Tyler Reddick and Bubba Wallace, a big game for him, coming home in 7th place. This is actually the highest 2311 Racing has been with their 2 cars in the top 10 in the points in their team's history. Chastain stays in the 10th position. Bell in 11th, 12th is Briscoe, 13th is Bowman, Buescher 14th, and Joey Logano in 15th. He currently holds the final transfer spot with Suarez winning at Atlanta. Even though he's in 18th place, he would be technically in the playoffs if they started today. So the first 4 drivers out would be Kyle Busch, Brad Keselowski, Eric Jones, and John Hunter Nemechek. Okay, so thoughts on this race. Like I said earlier at the beginning of this episode, that was very entertaining. From stage 2 onwards was a very entertaining race, and it was a race of attrition. I mean, for a race to be 16 cautions, and it wasn't like what we saw in 2022 where it was tires, like 2008 Brickyard almost level of bad with tires just falling off left, right, and center. This was a race that drivers they weren't able to get a handle of everything. I mean, they were getting loose, getting sideways. I mean, it was very entertaining racing. From a production standpoint with Fox, again, every week is the same thing. They missed the battle when Reddick passed Hamlin, even though Reddick had that bad pit stop. They missed it. And you even had Boyer saying on the commentary, "We missed a big one, folks." It's like, yeah, you did. I mean, it's almost common knowledge that in a pit stop cycle, you follow the leaders, or at very least keep within reach, you know? It took them 2-3 laps to mention it after it happened, you know? So yeah, that's enough about Fox. But as a race for Texas, after what we went through the last 2 weeks, this was a good change of pace. This was a fun, entertaining race. Got a bit sloppy in the end, especially when NASCAR, I understand, you know, they got to do their procedure, but man, 5 or 6 laps for a 1-car spin is kind of pathetic. When they were counting down those laps right before the Hamlin and Elliott spin, they were counting down those laps to get a green, white checkered finish. There was like 7, 8 to go. No need to have this many laps, you know, counted off. They could have gone green a lap or 2 earlier, but that's enough of the bad. Let's talk about some good. Obviously, Chase Elliott going back to victory lane. I feel a good story to see him break that winless streak. Good to see Hooters come back to victory lane after everything they've been through with the history of NASCAR. So that's a nice thing to see. RCR, 8th and 9th place. That's awesome to see, honestly, with Dylan, who has been nowhere to be found this season. Kyle Busch, who has had an awful start to the 2024 season. They stopped the bleeding. Even though they didn't have a good car, for them to finish in the top 10, that is something that they can hang their head up high on. I mentioned Bubba Wallace, 7th place, even though I thought he'd be out of the top 20. Somehow, he racks up another top 10 finish, and now you see he's 9th in points, so a good recovery for that 23 team. Chase Briscoe in 6th place. I said in the pre-race show, that 14 car, lately, they may not be the fastest car, they may not be the most flashy car, but somehow, by the end of these races, they're there. Just in or around the top 10, they're there. Good run for them. They started 5th, finished 6th. You can't complain about that. I mentioned Carlos Hocevar, a great run for him in that 77 car. He spun earlier on lap 114 to rebound back to a 10th place finish. A great run for him. You're going to notice a lot of drivers that were involved in accidents or mishaps rebound to have great finishes. Even, like I said, Christopher Bell had a mangled, banged up car. Top 20 finish for what they went through. I say that's a win. And speaking of wins, that Texas crowd, I have not seen Texas look that packed in a long time. And I know people have their issues with NASCAR, and people, you know, there are certain things they don't like about NASCAR. I'm one of them, but they're doing something right. I mean, Texas, I haven't seen it look that packed in a long time. You look at some other racetracks, Bristol, haven't seen it look that packed in a long time. Martinsville, almost every single track we go to, it just looks bigger, looks more full. Ratings going up. We'll see how they come out for this weekend at Texas. But, I mean, NASCAR looks like it's on the up and up. And I think for a race like Texas, provided some very entertaining racing. Offered a change of pace, got a bit sloppy in the end, but it did have, I think, a good balance of tire management, tire control, but also still some driver handling needed to be a part of this because the way they were racing, they were just looked like they couldn't get a handling on this car, which is something we like to see. And before we wrap it up for Chase Elliott, this was awesome to see him. I mean, this was the Chase Elliott of old. It was awesome to see him race the way we saw him race today. Usually, especially as of late, Chase has just been off the ball, but this was the more aggressive, the more I want this win attitude of Chase Elliott. That's something we've been used to seeing, and to see it finally come back, it was a surprise to see, and also really fun to see the moves that Chase was making. That three-wide pass on Hamlin and Reddick that he did in turns number 1, very ballsy move on his part. Great drive for him, and he deserved it. Simply put, deserved it, and is your winner at Texas. Overall, I must say, for Texas standards, this was one of the best races I've seen from this racetrack in a long time. This race was a battle of attrition. We saw so many different lead changes, plenty of battles. From stage 2 onwards, it was fun to watch. If I had to give a rating from a scale of 1 to 10, I would give this race an 8 out of 10. For Texas standards, you have to understand, for Texas standards, this was a very fun race. But those are my thoughts on this race. Let me know what you think of it in the comment section down below. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more content. As always, until next time, my name is Jett from MDK. I'll see y'all next time.